Hi, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Seems to be a dog in the background. How is that?
Yep, that's me. That's my
That's
brother.
you. Doesn't change, Davina. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm trying out a Matrix background for Zoom. How
Okay,
trippy is that?
Oh, yeah.
good. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Caroline.
Hi.
Hey, Michelle.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Caroline. How are you?
Hi, Samantha.
Hi, Carolyn.
Seems like everybody's getting long hair. So it's gonna be...
Yeah.
No hairdressers.
No trust on my side for any hairdressers. I'll be there in the whole thing.
So has anyone done anything different over the weekend?
That's a good question.
I think I watched a lot of telly. Yeah, I did.
Lots of television.
Yep.
Is that different?
I also clean the house a lot. I don't normally clean the house a lot, but that's been like my standard job now.
That may be why I did something different. I didn't clean my house. So I'm sick of cleaning my house.
Fair enough.
Actually, my girlfriend and I, we start doing the photo collections right now. So for the last 10 years, we didn't do any photo collections. So she wants to do photo collections. So we got a program for the next 2 years. So it's gonna take some time.
Are you going to like print out digital photos?
Actually, we have printed it out already. And we always put it like aside, and so right now we have to make like the selection which pictures we're gonna put where and how we're gonna put them together. So that's gonna be.
That's the fun part.
I'm not sure. It's gonna be time consuming. No,
Fair
it's gonna
point.
be nice. So that's good. But right here in Paris, we have like another week, and then we can actually travel again, like for 100 kilometers. And so we're gonna have like a little bit more freedom back. So that's
Nice.
next off. So
That's great.
where are you, Michelle?
I'm in Massachusetts and near Boston. Yeah. So not opening up. Not here.
Opening up.
Not yet.
Very soon.
Hopefully.
It's 10 o'clock, guys. Shall we get started? And I think people are going to continue to trickle in, but let's start by maybe welcoming our new members, and welcome to everyone else who's been coming every month or every couple of weeks lately. Nancy, have you joined us before? Oh, you're muted.
No, that's okay. I unmuted myself. No, this is my first time and I'm very excited.
Welcome. Where are you? Hold up.
I'm in Kingston, New York, Hudson Valley, and New York State schools are closed for the rest of the year.
Oh, wow. And Carolyn, I don't know if you've joined for Media Club before, have you?
I'm not sure if I have or not. If I have, it was a long time ago, but I was quite compelled by the TED Talk, so I wanted to jump in. I'm going to be on mute most of the time here today because I'm having windows installed around me. So there are hammers and saws. So forgive me, with a stay-at-home requirement, there's no place for me to go otherwise. So it'll be interesting.
I think I've met you in the virtually viral hangouts, have I not? Yes.
And Katie, welcome back. Sidra, are you able to hear us?
Hi, yes I am. I'm new here and this is my first meeting, so I wasn't sure if I should speak up or something.
Yes, always.
I'll keep that in mind, thank you.
This is only my second one I'm joining and I'm hosting, so I hope you speak up.
I will try.
Hey, I did the same thing.
Oh, okay, that makes me feel better.
Yep.
And
I think then there's Eleonora from John Cabot University. Is that right, Eleonora? Do you hear us? She might be far away.
Hosna, can you hear us now? Sorry.
And that is Eleonora. So she was just saying hello, I guess.
Eleonora, sorry,
Hello,
please
everyone.
continue.
Anyone else new? Hosna?
Yeah, hi. I can hear you now.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just joined you. Could you please tell me that what we can start from? Should you introduce yourself? Yeah.
Oh yeah, just say hello and let us know where
Oh,
you're
okay.
from. Your first time
Yeah.
joining.
Yeah. I'm Husnain. I'm a PhD student at the University of Regina, and I'm doing my project on technology, and I love technology so much. So especially these days, it makes me think that the virus, I mean, that because I've just started to write down my proposal and to think about, and it's just the beginning for me. So yeah, and these days I'm thinking about a good topic that can help us to maybe help students for next generation a little bit more. And I really happy to be here to see that, to maybe use your idea, and yeah.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And Vito, I think might be your first time joining us as well. Okay, if you want to unmute and say hello, go for it. Otherwise, we'll keep going. I should have said this before I had you all say hello and introduce yourself, but we are recording. So we'll be putting this on YouTube and sending out the video at a later time. And you can also follow along. Davina is like masterful at tweeting and participating in things at the same time. So if you want to follow along in the conversation there, you can do that on Twitter using the hashtags DigiURI and hashtag Media Club. By the way, if anyone has a better idea for a single hashtag that will serve our purpose and not be too long, let us know, because 2 is more complicated than 1 when it comes to hashtags. So,
Hashtag DigiURI Media Club.
I know it's just so long. I don't know.
I know.
If you think that will work, you should totally go for it. So I want to introduce everyone. I think almost everyone knows Michelle, but Michelle Ciccone is going to lead our discussion today. She's the Tech Integration Specialist at Foxborough Middle School in Massachusetts. And with that, Michelle, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm looking over at my other device at my notes. So as you all know, we watched the TED Talk, We're Building a Dystopia, just to make people click on ads by, I'm embarrassed to say I don't know if I'm going to pronounce her name right. Zeynep Tufekci. Does anyone know? Is that right? Okay.
Zeynep Tufekci.
Tufekci. Gotcha. Thank you, Davina. So for those who don't know her, she's at the UNC, University of North Carolina School of Information and Library Science. She's originally from Turkey and a former programmer, which I think is important context for her expertise. She studies the social impacts of technology, and she wrote a book called Twitter and Tear Gas, the Ecstatic Fragile Politics of Network Protests in the 21st Century. I haven't read it yet. Has anyone else read it? Okay, cool.
We can listen to it.
So just as a brief 1-minute synopsis of what this TED Talk is about, Dr. Tufekci, she talks about the persuasive architecture. That's the phrase she gives for what web companies like Facebook and Amazon are developing for business purposes. But as she outlines, that persuasive architecture is very easily put to use for political purposes. So as I was listening to this this talk. I just put a link to a Padlet in the chat, and but I'm just going to share my screen, so feel free to do either or. But as I was watching the TED Talk, I was really paying attention to some key quotes that I thought were really, I don't know, like I just want to remember these. So I copied and pasted them and I put this in Padlet. So you can feel free to like interact with this Padlet or not. But I just thought that laying out these key quotes were, and there goes my dog, were helpful to get the key ideas. So she talks about how artificial intelligence on its own isn't the problem, but the way that it's used to manipulate us in novel, unexpected ways. We're not programming anymore. We're growing intelligence we no longer understand. And you can read those quotes. So to give you an idea of what I hope to do, I hope for the first half of this talk, we talk about the problem. And then the second half of our conversation, we talk about solutions, because I think that I think we can talk about the problem a lot because it's a fascinating problem, but I'd also love to brainstorm with you all, like this last part, and I put it in blue. How do we use our creativity and all that to solve this problem? So I'm going to stop sharing and open it up. And if it would be, if I'm gonna pose a question and we can respond to that question or not, or diverge from this question. But as we start talking about this talk and kind of like the problem, I wonder who the intended audience you think, who's the intended audience of this TED Talk? And you can speak to that question or any other thoughts you have.
So back in the old days, TED Talks were for upper middle class white people who paid a lot of money to go to the TED conferences. So I think that still generally applies, college educated, professional people, that would be my guess. But not specialists, non-specialists.
Yeah, I would say as well, like some academics or people who are interested in the topic that might have already like a certain background about the topic and are attracted by that. So just like us, we are attracted by the talk, and so we have that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wondered the same thing. So a lot of what she said in this TED Talk was expanded quite a bit when in Shoshana Zuboff's book that we read before, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And I wondered the same thing then, like who would read this? Like aside from those of us who are really interested in maybe literacy education or maybe policy, like who else is going to really dig into this and want to understand? I don't know. I'm stumped on that one actually.
I feel like TED Talks get used a lot in professional development now. At least in schools, especially for if you have kind of a lazy manager assigning the professional development, they'll just sort of search up a TED Talk that has something to do with something that they want teachers to think about in their school.
Yeah, I think the business community is interested in this topic because of the way in which that digital advertising and marketing is sort of transformed what they do. So maybe the business community is a target audience for this as well.
Yeah, I was wondering about this because I'm curious. I want to put myself back in September 2017, which when this TED Talk was posted to, I don't know when the TED Talk was given, but it was posted in 2017. And I feel like in the last 3 years, our cultural understanding of these topics has grown so much. And I wonder I wonder to what extent this TED Talk helped to educate the public or was tapping into an already educated public about these topics. But I don't know, I just feel like this was a specialized corner. Like not everyone even would think to be interested in these topics back then, but now like, now disinformation is on the tip of everyone's tongue, and it's a totally different level of consciousness of these issues. Although maybe I'm misremembering what 2017 was like. Maybe we were all there.
I think right after the elections, people really went wild about misinformation, and it was probably like the beginning of that arc. But I think what's interesting is that I don't recall her talking too much about that in particular, although I could be misremembering. It's been a few days since I listened to it. But the problems that she's talking about are inherently connected, right?
Mm-hmm. She does talk about the impact of Facebook posts on voter turnout. So certainly the election was at least in the background of what she.
You know, Michelle, you're asking kind of about how these ideas are circulating through the culture. And I'll tell you, I see this topic everywhere now in entertainment TV. So it's in The Good Wife, it's in NCIS, it's in Bull, it's in all the crime, law and order, police procedurals. It's like in BoJack Horseman, it's everywhere. Yeah. So I think the entertainment media has begun to incorporate this knowledge into popular culture, and that's helping people have a better understanding of loyalty programs at the CVS, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Also Black Mirror and the likes, to sort of show the extreme situation that Zeynep Tufekci talks about. Also, I couldn't help but wonder when she was talking about preservation architectures, and she was talking about how machine learning and algorithms sort of stack information up to the extent where we don't even know how they're learning itself. And it immediately made me think of race scholars, people who are working with algorithms in race and surveillance, and how AI can be racist.
Yeah, and when you marry that with the persuasive architecture that she's talking about, could become very nefarious very quickly. Yeah.
Also, you know, when she started talking about Orwellian versus the kind of surveillance architecture that we are under right now, I couldn't help but think that when you look at Foucault and what he says about the panopticon, if you were to willingly enter the panopticon, ensuring that by putting up pictures or posts, the attention was on you because you want the likes and the comments and the shares, how twisted would that be? It's almost as if we want to be surveilled.
Right. Right. Yeah. I am often struck when I'll have conversations about this with students, and the degree to which it's convenient, these persuasive architectures do provide some, at least some benefit. It makes life more convenient, and how that really does, like the immediate convenience really outweighs the future potential costs. And you know, do you think that the TED Talk does a good job of, I don't know, shaking us into caring or consciousness about this?
You know, I think that's one thing. One thing that I thought I left the TED Talk thinking about was like when you just said it left us with, you know, this being part of our consciousness. I think my kind of dissatisfaction with it is, like you had said before, I agree. Like, I think this is in our consciousness now, and it's becoming increasingly, the public is increasingly aware of these issues. But what do we do with that information, except for to say, like, we're aware of it now? I kept thinking of Douglas Rushkoff's Program or Be Programmed, which I thought was such an important book. And, I think that he takes it, another step, which is just, and of course he wrote, his wasn't a 20-minute presentation. I'm sure she would as well. But to talk about the importance of learning the programming language, learning how these architectures are built, learning what lies underneath the, behind the interfaces. And then again, that makes me think of, privilege and access. When we say like our culture is more aware of these things, I wonder like which culture is. Certainly in 2017, like many of us were in a PhD program or in an academic community. But what about our other 600 friends on Facebook who are just, are not in those kind of privileged communities and have the awareness and the conversation that we have? So I mean, I loved the TED Talk, but I left with just kind of like this increased like kind of dissatisfaction with it. Like, so what now? And I don't really know.
Yeah.
It makes me think about cultural literacy and E.D. Hirsch and this idea that, we need shared understandings in order to talk about issues and problems. And examples like, you need to know about obviously Nazism and the genocide of the Holocaust in order to talk about, Rwanda or Somalia or these other kinds of contexts. And it seems like these TED Talks and books, I mean, we get little windows and views into this, but it's like we need a shared cultural understanding of how these things fit together. And then ideally, some suggested agendas for change, like what kinds of groups are then advocating for a policy agenda to really try to support privacy, to try to prevent us from having the kind of invasive surveillance state that the Uyghur, minority in China, sorry about that, good grief, is suffering under in, right now. It just seems there's been some great documentaries on Frontline, and they're just these deep dives. But I would love to watch them together with other people, like, at our school and in our church and in our community, because it's like, these are really, really important, but we're only just dipping, I don't know, getting a small, I don't know what the right metaphor is, but like a small taste of these things. And it's not like we can understand how they all fit together. And it's frustrating because there's such important issues.
Yeah. Absolutely. Related to this, I'm wondering if I can add a provocation at this point, because I totally agree. This conversation, everyone needs to be part of this conversation. Everyone needs to understand these issues. And I wonder, a related fear that I have is that the conversation is surface level to a certain extent. And I'm gonna share my screen one more time. This made me think of a tweet that I saw. When was this? Back in December. This is from Joan Donovan. She's from the Shorenstein Center at Harvard. She's an expert on disinformation. And she tweeted this out, and I bookmarked it, and I've thought a lot about it. She wrote, "The turn to disinformation reminds me of the way ideology worked against social theory in the 1960s. If everything is ideological, then ideology is no longer a useful category of analysis. If all talk of politics is disinformation, then where goes information?" And I think about this with the word algorithm. I think that as this topic, as algorithmic literacy does kind of seep into popular culture media, I wonder to what extent everything is attributed to the algorithm. And so what does the algorithm even mean? Do we even know what the algorithm is? Is the algorithm the source of all our problems or not? And so I'm like, at this point in 2020, I'm just kind of like, I'm torn, like, okay, yes, I want everyone in on this conversation, but I also want this conversation to be productive as well. And if we come to a shared understanding of vocabulary, like that's important, but if everything's the algorithm, then nothing's the algorithm. It's a half-baked thought, but what do you guys think about that? Does that?
I mean, I think that's a really good concern. I mean, you want to have the conversation, but it has to be with a level of depth where it's not just kind of borrowing terms and saying, I mean, when we think of, when we look across pop culture and even when we just have conversations, like so many people attribute what's going on to Facebook or anything online to like this algorithm. Well, the algorithm does this, and then there's no like depth to what that is. And I also don't have a lot. And even the speaker in the TED Talk said like the programmers don't even know what's going on at this point with the algorithm. And so, I mean, so it's trying to figure out this place to excavate the algorithm that goes beyond with just saying, you know, like you said, the algorithm, because like, you know, that tweet you posted really shows how that using that language without the level of understanding of it can lose its power, can take its power away from it.
Yeah. Well, how do we even, like, we don't understand the algorithm, and I certainly don't. And I don't know how many people have enough understanding to have a deep conversation about what algorithms are doing. And it seems like whenever they cover those kinds of things on shows, like The Weekly did one about Brazil and how there's a lot of, did you guys see that? How the algorithms connect and feed people new videos on YouTube. So it sends people increasingly to the fringes because like they'll start with a video of somebody kind of popular culture, and it'll get more into like Bolsonaro politics, and then it'll get even farther into these like really racist places. And so they're radicalizing youth who don't even realize it, but they get sucked into these algorithms. But they've started studying some of them, and they're also feeding child pornography to people in a terrifying way. And YouTube didn't even know that was happening.
To sort of take it to, I know that that's probably the second part of the discussion, but you know how Susan Wojcicki at YouTube, she's one of the few women in tech who's also making decisions and taking on a management role. She's actually attacking algorithms like the ones that Katie mentioned. The ones which are showing you extreme content, the ones which are showing kids who are out there to maybe see a SpongeBob cartoon, child pornography or grooming videos and stuff like that. So I think individual responsibility is important, where you try and understand what these terms mean and have, like Wes Fryer mentioned, a shared social understanding of these so that you can attack you know, things that want to surveil you, things that want to commodify you and sell you. But I also think that it's immensely important for political economy, questions of political economy to be raised, and questions of self-regulation by platforms to be raised. So for instance, Twitter decided not to have political advertising. That was clearly, I mean, I know that that was one of those things that you do, and how much of that is actually implemented is a big question. But they still did take a step, yes? They still put themselves out there. So I'm not saying that the internet should be regulated. No, it's still, you know, a free speech platform which can be used for emancipation, social movements, etc. But I think it's time that the companies that tell us that the platforms are for us to use for free and then sell us to companies own up to certain responsibilities if they've had enough, I think.
Can I build on a point that Davina brought up? So I think one of the things Zeynep Tufekci does well, and Carolyn points this out in the chat. Carolyn, you said it so well. So she ties together the threads about advertising, machine learning, recommendation engines, and political campaigns and democracy. Nice. And she, in the end, says it's really about structures. It's about structures. So, but at the end after kind of having demonized this new business model. It's a new business model that she's made sound very, very scary. And I feel like as the public, and I think we're all part of this getting to the tipping point where we have to have enough people who can talk comfortably about this. We can make some decisions. Do we want the industry to regulate itself? Do we want advertisers to be accountable for themselves? Do we want the government to regulate the platforms or the advertisers, right? Or do we want individuals to be accountable, right? So there's basically any of those combinations. The industry regulates itself, the government industry regulates either the platforms or advertisers or both, or we do something. And I feel like in order to get to the tipping point of 30% of the public being able to make an informed policy decision on which of those strategies is best, then we want to promote individual responsibility. So for example, when I go to the beauty store, you girls know what store that is, right? When I go to the beauty store, they want to put me into their friggin' database. They want to give me a consumer loyalty card. And I say, decline. And most of them go, oh, they don't even know what that means. And so they say, oh, can I have your email address? And I just say, decline. And sometimes I have to say it a few times before they realize I don't want to fucking be in your goddamn loyalty system, because you'll link up that to my Facebook page and I'll start getting beauty ads on my fucking Facebook page. And I found that it's not effective to yell at the clerk. But I feel like personal responsibility is where it starts. Because if we don't give a shit about our privacy, if we don't give a shit, if we don't act like we understand that when we go to the loyalty card at CVS, yes, you get 5% off, but they sell that data to Facebook. Like, if we don't value it, then how the hell do we think government or industry is going to do a goddamn thing? Oh, I'm off my high horse now. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, actually, maybe we can transition to talking about that more, like the solution. So I take Jason's point very, I totally agree. We talk about the problem, but like, now what? And Renee has started us on that. So let's continue. So I just put in the chat the quote from, that's funny, Jason. From Zeynep in the TED Talk. She says, we have to mobilize our technology, our creativity, and yes, our politics, so we can build artificial intelligence that supports us in our human goals, but that is also constrained by our human values. So Renee is pointing to the value of personal responsibility, I think. So I'm curious, and if we could get into small groups, if that would make sense. So, and then I just put into the chat, I guess, the prompt. So how do we fix this? What human values might we need to employ to constrain these technologies? What human values are truly universal, given these platforms are global? Because I think that's also a complicating factor. So I have never put us into breakout rooms before. Can I rely on you, Sam, to do that? Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Do you want 2-3 people? Or do you want me to just tell you how to do it?
Could you put, how many do we have? We have 18. Are groups of 4 too many? 3 or 4? Something like that?
I think that's great.
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, and the prompt makes sense? We're good? Cool. So, so yeah, if we can brainstorm in small groups and then come back together and think about, okay, now what?
How much time do we have, Michelle?
Oh, good question. 10 minutes? Does that make sense? Okay.
Actually, I think, Michelle, you might have to do
the option
like it normally does.
Okay. So do I click on participants?
Manage participants and then go into more, and I think that should help you, I suppose. Who's the host of the meeting? Who's recording?
I think
The host
Sam.
should be able to do that. Or maybe we just discuss it here.
Yeah, who is
I'm
the
the first time
owner
I'm
of
using
Zoom?
HKU's version
Oh,
of this, so I'm not, maybe it doesn't
Got it.
allow.
Okay. Never mind then. Great. Okay. Scrap the small group.
Sorry
Large
about
group. No, that's okay. Okay. So what do you think? How do we fix this? What human values do we need to employ to constrain these technologies? That's a very provocative question, I think, that she poses.
To rebut to what Professor Hobbs said, I think, yes, of course, it's important that we as individuals recognize our responsibilities and understand that we need to have a certain kind of digital literacy to be able to deal with these things, right? So for instance, my father has just discovered TikTok. And I'm in a city which is red zoned. So we've got zones in our country. So the movement is very restricted. So I can't go anywhere. I have to answer some of his questions and look at look at the TikToks that he's showing me. But he doesn't realize the kind of data that TikTok is harvesting off of his phone. And as long as he's getting his entertainment, he doesn't really mind it. So yes, individual responsibility is important, but then once we gather a lot of people, we go to talk to industry, government about this. Shouldn't they also be taking their share of responsibility, like we have GDPR in Europe?
Actually, if I can speak to that, that experience as well. I just had this experience on Friday of a friend texting me and saying, you need to download the Marco Polo app. It's so fun. We'll have fun just sending videos to each other. They're silly. And I haven't responded because I'm like, I don't want to download it. I don't know what this app is. But now do I have to like ruin your fun by like being a wet blanket and talking about this makes me uncomfortable? And yeah, it's like with a little bit of knowledge, you become like things aren't as fun anymore. And so now she probably thinks like I'm a flake and I'm not responding, but I don't really know how to, I don't know how to push back on that social dynamic.
I think the point is to stop blaming technology and start blaming people who want to earn profits by manipulating technology and commodifying people, treating them like data, and data which they can sell because they can easily personalize, they can easily customize. I think it's time for us to change the system per se. But how do we do that? So I think I forget her name. I don't know if someone can remember. This amazing scholar at MIT Media Lab. And she works on dismantling how algorithms and race sort of are at opposite ends. And I think she's also been fighting at the Senate, the US Senate, and she's been talking about bringing in legislation which works towards not having AI that is racist, doing something about racist AI.
Is that Joy?
Yes.
Wamo I don't.
Yes. She's the one.
She has a great TED Talk too.
Maybe you could look at hers next.
Yeah. Carolyn, you had your hand up. Should I unmute you? No.
I have so much background noise, but I'll briefly say that I'm torn between individual responsibility and collective action. I'm involved in climate change action very much, and I'm conscious of my carbon footprint, for example, and model that for other people. But I really don't believe individual action can trump the fossil fuel industry. So I transpose that to the algorithm, the persuasive architecture nature, and I think it's got to be both if it's really going to have any impact. And I think it's very scary that are so many powerful entities right now that are seeking to persuade mass thinking. I think it's very scary.
I think
Just
this is very...
Go ahead, Mike.
All right.
You go ahead.
Okay. I think, yeah, I believe as well, like the power of the solution has to come from individual and also collective action. For example, when I hear like that YouTube is putting out like child pornography, I'm saying to myself, so where's the responsibility from YouTube to watch over the content? In a way, they're going to argue they cannot watch out for everything that's put up online. But in a way, they're making it quite easy for themselves. The other fact is also like about collecting our data. In a way, if we agree that we're going to give away our data, if we do not agree, then actually we cannot participate in anything anymore. But I remember also like Edward Snowden saying that this might be actually like the little thing to change, because people are just taking stuff from us away. So maybe there's something to change right here from this collective or like this systematic data collection that is allowed for the moment. And maybe there's something to do again, like that there's something that might be kind of politics. But I really like as well, like the social responsibility or like the individual responsibility, like saying, if I'm going to go in that shop, I don't have to say I'm going to buy that stuff. I'm going to have to learn actually like to say no as an individual. And I think that's also like very powerful. So I think both levels of for sure have to come into play right here. So I'm not sure how this is going to work out. The media literacy is most likely for us like an easy way to do, because we are the teachers in the classroom, we can talk about it. But then like on a social or like on a society level, that might be a bit more tricky.
Yeah.
Jason.
Yeah, I think it's hard for individuals to control their data. I mean, it just is. But even if you decide not to get loyalty cards, they're mining your emails, and I can't control what platform my school that they use Google. But sometimes I find advertisements that come out of something that I wrote in an email in my school emails. That's my professional account. I can't opt out of using Google for that. And yet they're using it, and they're like, I don't know what to do about that.
I got a crazy idea. A new platform could be created that pays you, right? So right now, if Facebook collects data on you, they own it, right? And they can monetize it. And that's really the business model is we give away our data for free and they make millions of dollars selling that to advertisers. But what if I got paid when I released my data? What if my data belonged inherently to me? A simple law that said users own their data, and if companies want to use it, they have to pay the users. Just flips the economics, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the lobbyists made that not happen.
What is the Jaron Lanier wrote that book? It kind of has that premise. I remember reading it and thinking, such a great idea that we'll never see happen. But I mean, I love the idea. Like, and he even had a model at the end of it. Like every time you post something, you get 2 cents into an account and all this. But it's, you know, I keep thinking of right before the pandemic started, I took my kids to the library and I got one of my kids the book The Lorax, the Dr. Seuss book, and then the library is closed, and so I've been reading the same book to him very often. And the one kind of dilemma in this is, unless like, you know, is really kind of this individual versus collective change. Like, you know, the big business owner, you know, says, yeah, I understand that that's an important issue, but I also have my rights to run a business and to make more money and to do these things. And so, you know, you go and protest and I'm going to go keep making money, and we'll see, you know, hopefully it works out, which of course it doesn't. And I just wondered, giving back to the original prompt that Michelle posed, I wondered if, you know, what are some examples of how human values do merge with corporate interest on, you know, a global scale? Like we see this like on a small scale with like Tom's shoes, or I don't know if I'm getting that right, you know, but where do we see that on a large scale?
Yeah. One thing that I think about is that so many of these platforms are built on this idea of amplification of content, and how that's so rooted in this idea of freedom of speech, which is not just an American concept, but that is a value that's held very near and dear to the American psyche, and the fact that so many of these platforms were developed in Silicon Valley, and how that's baked into the essence of these platforms. And I heard this interesting juxtaposition of freedom of speech versus freedom of reach, and that maybe that's what we need to problematize. Like, yes, there is freedom of speech, but you do not have freedom of reach to amplify whatever message you want to put out there. And I wonder, like, to what extent can we maintain the ability, the wonderful ability of these platforms to give voice to ideas from every corner of the world, but also separate it from that freedom of reach mentality.
I think that's what Facebook is trying to do. And clearly the mea culpa that happened after the congressional hearings last year revealed that Facebook wants to stop amplifying hate. And that I think they're pushing of the groups, right, is kind of an example of, they believe self-regulation can align those values with their business practices. I don't actually buy that, but I do see there's an effort being made at some platform companies to, you know, not be evil.
Another model that some people have asked is paying for your privacy. So you get a version of, say, for instance, Facebook, where you end up paying and your data doesn't get used. So you pay for the service. Facebook as a platform is no longer free for you. But I don't know how many people would want to pay for Facebook.
And it's such an interesting idea that privacy is commodified, like, which, you know, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to feel about that. Like, it used to be the default. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't know if I can't say that. The default used to be private, and now the default is not. But like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to be paid for the choice to sell my data to the highest bidder. There's something also kind of, I don't know. That's another kind of choice that we would be making as a digital society. And I don't know if that's better. I don't know.
Right. But just now imagine 100 senators and 535 representatives talking about this topic. So, yeah. And try to imagine that they come to some good decisions.
Yeah.
So yes, theoretically, I think democracy is a really good way to do this. And I do think theoretically government should be able to regulate. And clearly we see how functional governments like Germany can establish laws for data protection that seem to actually benefit the entire world, right? As the GRDP has done, right? But I don't right now feel like our government is functional enough to use deliberation and reasoning to figure out how to align our values with our hopes for this technology. Instead, I think special interests control our Congress, and would lead to really bad laws being developed. So that's partly why I feel like I'm not in the individual responsibility category by choice. It's only that I feel pushed there by the reality, of what's on the ground.
But I think that it's a very good point you see bringing up, that it depends on the political context, like what's the structure or the frame of and so then, yeah. But in a way, it depends also like on the educational context, what we're going to learn there. So right now we're in the position to say we want students to learn that. So, but maybe in 20 years it's going to be different. Kind of interesting question.
But I think about in the past year, there have been cities around the US that have banned the use of facial recognition software by municipal services. And that has been a very grassroots effort. I think it's San Francisco, Oakland, a couple of cities, Somerville and Cambridge in Massachusetts, and there might be one or two other cities. But that doesn't necessarily solve the problem for the US. But I do think it proves that lawyers, researchers, activists can put pressure on at least local government to force some real pressing pause on some of these technologies. And I think that, it doesn't totally apply to this scenario, this context, because these are multinational corporations with tentacles everywhere. But I do think there is evidence of new technologies being put, like the brakes being put on them, at least in the US.
Yeah, I wonder if these algorithms we're too deep.
Ugh.
I know, that's really cynical.
No, I mean, I think we are, and that's rough.
Yeah, like I think we needed some action 20 years ago.
Yeah.
When this was newer, and instead the web decided to go for ad-based things instead of subscription-based.
Yeah, I agree with Katie. The history of media regulation shows that, once the model is in place, dislodging it is futile. So we just regulation once the industry is consolidated, it holds on to its model. Ralph, what do you think? Can you change a business model in the history of the world? Have we ever seen any example of how regulation was able to fundamentally change a media business model?
I keep thinking about, all right, if we were in a pre-digital context, how would this look? How did the commodity exchange and the whole notion of data exchange in the era of broadcast television, right? Which is where we were essentially, our reward for our investment in advertising was to be entertained by programs, which became its own thing, right? And the data that we gave was really, there was how the ratings sort of made us part of a group that had a propensity to respond in a particular way. So in some ways, a lot of that is older than the digital environment. And, so that raises the question then, how do you, one of the things I wonder is, sometimes it feels like we're more globalized. Sometimes it feels like we're much more tribalized in terms of like cultural boundaries and how you get across those. So thinking about individual responsibility on a global scale is, I think, gets really complicated just because of the assumptions about the differences between commodities and data, and then how we're treated by the technologies that we interact with. So I don't know if it's helpful or not helpful to go to sort of like a previous generation and say, okay, how did mass media work in that context, and what does that tell us about how it's working now? So.
Well, Natasha offers in the chat, I mean, does all this mean that education is the solution? Like we need to focus on educating individuals so we can create a movement of informed people.
I would say ideally, but we've all seen how difficult that's been so far, and there's so many inequalities even in more basic education systems. Like, how do we all even agree on what digital literacy is or algorithm literacy is, and how do we standardize that, and who's right about it? So it's so much more complicated than I'd like it to be.
Yeah.
We also have a very aggressive group of people who are actively trying to dismantle public education the way we think about it. And, you know, DeVos continues on, making sure that a lot of the COVID money is actually going to charter schools. So, so that's one of those things where I think, you know, the individual ideas about the purpose and role of public education is still on the table. It's still being argued about.
So someone mentioned in the chat, I can't quite get to who it was. Oh, Karen Martel. She said that a 16-year-old son is very tech savvy, and he feels like seniors are more likely to get swindled, which means that we should look at vulnerable populations or specific consumer groups, and lobbyists should play a role. That's actually interesting. And then she mentioned some, I think, US specific organizations that are not very. But you know what? You're actually right. I mean, there is an argument where it's assumed that young people are inherently, since they're born into the system, are inherently capable of understanding the pros and cons, the opportunities and risks, which is something actually I sort of came across in my study as well. So okay, for those who don't know me, I'm a PhD student, and my topic is about uses, practices, and experiences of young people on social media, on digital and social media. So I'm essentially asking a lot of people in the age group of 10 to 18 what they do online, why they do it, how they do it, what are their you know, questions about it, doubts, what are their apprehensions, etc. And I'm actually surprised to see many of them are pretty nonchalant about the risks that are associated with us being commodified, our data being sold to advertisers. It's sort of a, oh well, the platform's free, so big deal. And I know a few tricks, like I know how to go use or browse the internet in incognito mode, to sort of shake it off. And then we have these memes, you know, which talk about, let us confuse the Instagram algorithm. And then they ask you to do certain things, you know, post about something or share about something. So forth. I think young people have ways and means of not letting the system take maximum advantage. And then, of course, I also interviewed a cyber lawyer who was extra careful about how he dealt with the topic. And one of the first things that he told me was, Devina, privacy is an illusion. The minute you type in something on your phone, on your laptop, it's going somewhere. Whether it's a PIN, whether it's an OTP, it is going somewhere. That data is being collected somewhere. So yeah, you have no choice. This is the system that we've built. Capitalist structures, network society, where profit is maximized, and this is how it's going to be.
Yeah. So one of the 7th graders at my school was talking to her friends, loudly complaining that her mother didn't want her to use TikTok anymore because of Chinese privacy issues. And she was like, my mom's just racist, though. There's nothing wrong with TikTok. It's just because she doesn't like Chinese people. And I was just like, oh my God.
Which I think speaks to, when we blame everything on the tech and the algorithms, it allows us to ignore the fact that these are actually really old, really deeply embedded societal issues. And on that really happy note, we didn't come up with a solution, but I hope that we continue this conversation. But I'm going to turn it back over to Sam to wrap us up in the last couple of minutes.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, so to wrap up, I just wanted to remind you guys to continue this conversation on Twitter using both of the hashtags DigiURI and Media Club until we come up with a magical new one that you guys are going to help with. I also really quickly wanted to, we sent out emails, I think in December, that we had created a new microsite that houses all the information about the club, including voting forms, where to recommend a title, and all the upcoming schedule. So I'm going to put the link in the chat here. And if you guys will, see if I can share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So if we go over to this tab here, here's the website. So you can see what's coming up. And the next time we meet will be May 18th for a discussion of SNL at home with Ralph and myself. And then after that, we'll do June 1st, online behavior, real life consequences, and the unfolding of a societal media scandal. And we're still voting for, oops, I need to change that date, but we'll vote until the end of May for the July title. So anyway, you can find the links to do all of that stuff up here. Recommend a title. We're really short on audio titles. So if you have a podcast in particular that you think that we should discuss, it would be really helpful if you guys could recommend some more audio titles. So with that, thank you, Jason. Jason, by the way, has populated probably at least a third of this list. So thanks for that. So we'll send out the recording probably today or tomorrow, as always. And thank you guys for joining us. Michael, do you want to say anything?
No, not many thanks for Michelle for running the show today. Thanks a lot. That was fantastic. And thanks everybody for coming along, speaking up. And I hope to see you soon again for a nice discussion. So my final thoughts and words.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
That's fun.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Have a nice one. Bye-bye.
Bye.